I'm here today in the garden of Vinay, who's been doing some absolutely amazing work with pines. I think many of you will have seen his posts on social media. Vinny's travelled the world, it seems, meeting masters and learning techniques. And where he's kind of gone crazy is with Japanese black pines. And he's really building up quite an authority in the UK here. How to develop these trees simply from cuttings in a very, very short amount of time. So Vinay, this is, as an example, this is a cutting taken just...
Yeah, this is a seedling cutting. When I say cutting, it is seedling cutting because uh, when the seedling is around 4 weeks old, we make a cut with a razor, and when we make a cut with a razor, it produces roots. This was the concept I have not developed. This was developed by a Japanese bonsai master.
So you cut the roots off, the initial
Yeah.
roots off,
Yeah.
and then start a fresh
A
nabari.
fresh nebari, yeah. With this
Wow.
particular one, what happened was the roots were so bad. Even after cutting once, twice, it was just throwing very bad.
You weren't getting the radial roots.
I was
coming
not
out.
getting the
Yeah,
radial roots.
yeah.
So that's why what happened was I thought, I got a rock, and this is a rock, sandstone rock, which sucks water. So I just planted it on the top of it and tied with a wire. So it did grow well, and I think it is loving the rock because the rock itself sucks water. It's the only rock in the world which sucks water. So that's why it is
Right.
loving it, and that's why it is thriving into it.
Now this is something that I've noticed even in the UK, and talking earlier, is this idea that Japanese black pines are incredibly thirsty in this country.
Yes.
And through the growing season, you want to be watering it really heavily. You don't want to be withdrawing water like you would with a white pine. This is almost a street tree, isn't it, in
Yeah.
almost tropical areas of
Absolutely.
Japan.
Absolutely. Because Japanese black pine, they grow near the seashore. So, the three pines are there in Japan: Japanese black pine, Japanese red pine, and Japanese white pine. So, Japanese black pine is near the seashore. So, they love a lot of humidity. And
Ah.
one fundamental factor is in this country we have a hard water. Japanese black pine can thrive in hard water.
Ah, I understand.
Yeah,
Right.
because they are near the seashore, they get all the time salty.
So it's calcium is something they actually require.
Yes, yes,
Yeah, right.
absolutely. And why they are double flush pines? Because what happens in Japan? Because they are on the
Do you believe that there are double flush pine in the UK?
Yes,
Yeah.
they are indeed. Because UK weather is, I consider, a temperate weather. It's temperate. I mean, of course, recently the weather changed a lot, but why they are double flush is because in Japan, what happens on the seashore, the moment in the spring the new candles appear, there was a heavy wind, and that heavy wind breaks the candle. So plant has evolved over a period of time to know how to survive. So they throw the second flush.
It's evolved to cope with the
evolved.
damage that will come from the
Yes.
spring winds,
Yeah.
and then recover and put out
Yeah.
an undamaged flush.
Similarly, it happens to red pine, but red pines are little bit higher on the altitude.
Yes.
It also happens with them, but white pine is absolutely on the top of the mountain, so there is no concept of double flush for white pine.
Yeah, they've evolved completely differently.
Yeah. So that's why you can never treat a Japanese white pine and Japanese black pine same,
Yeah.
because their requirements are completely different.
So let's talk about something that we've been seeing your posts on Facebook. Is this ability you seem to have to take cuttings, remove the roots off pines, and then grow a new set of roots. So if we have a look at the cuttings that you've taken this year, we're talking now in July.
Yeah.
Most pines started moving in May of this year.
Yes.
And we'll show people how they can start taking cuttings. Yeah, so these are the cuttings from this year, the current year's cuttings.
Yes, these are the current year's cutting, and the way I do it is, the moment the seedling is around 24 days to 30 days old, when they turn bit purplish, I take a razor blade and I remove the entire root system, and then I dip it into a rooting hormone. Typically, I use a gel, which is quite Clonex, we call it in the UK, and I dip it. The most important part at this point of time is so the most important part is when you do a seedling cutting, you need to use an inorganic media, and that inorganic media I use is I tried different sort of inorganic medias. I tried akadama, I tried pumice, I tried even lava rock. I used fines of that. The best thing which works is perlite for propagation. Perlite has been used for all the nurserymen have been using perlite for successful propagation.
It's a very traditional.
Yeah, it don't have any pathogens, to be honest, and pathogens don't thrive in perlite. You add peat to it because peat is the one which holds them together and which provides bit of moisture, because straight perlite, you water them, it dries in 1 hour's time.
The particularly is the Japanese black pine. They love the moisture.
So, but that's what I use, inorganic media, which gives me almost now nearly 100% success.
So what you're looking at is in the UK in May we will get extensions of the buds into candles.
Yeah.
And then the candles will reach a certain stage, which I believe you're explaining to me is this is the first this year's growth. As the needles start to open, then you cut into the hardwood at the base, and that is your cutting.
Yeah, that is the. So now the second part comes is because right now I explained the seedling cutting. I also do the cuttings because one of the things which I believe in, don't waste anything. So if I cut the top off and I throw it, it's of no use. What I use is I cut it and then I put a rooting hormone again.
So it's just below where there were buds and where the candles emerge. You get that woody part.
Yeah. You need to make sure that the needles have hardened. If the needles are soft, they are still in energy deficient mode. They are taking up energy rather than producing energy for the tree.
And that's the timing.
That's the timing of the hormonal exchange, because once they are hardened, the needles are hardened, they produce, then they become energy, generator.
Cutting is actually ready to produce new roots as well.
Absolutely. I will show you examples of where I got successful cuttings, and those cuttings are more vigorous than original seedling cuttings.
Now you're using some kind of rooting hormone as well.
Yes. I use Clonex gel.
Clonex gel, and that's you've had the best success with that.
Which has got the proper chemical hormone.
I mean, these for cuttings that were made literally 4 months ago.
4 months ago.
These are amazing, and they are so healthy. And this is one of the things that I find exciting about Vinny's work is he's creating so many trees just from cuttings, just from material that you might prune off a larger Japanese black pine, even in a park or gardens. So if we have a look at the next stage, where trees that are in their second growing season, and look at some of those examples.
Sure.
So you've now given us a couple of examples here of pines that you propagated last year. They're in their second growing season, but actually it's only around a year since you took them as cuttings. And instantly, looking at something like this, it's crazy that this is just a second season cutting. You're getting some amazing results, but I will let you explain exactly what you're doing here, Vinay. So what you're explaining is this was actually a seed that you germinated and it grew, and then when the seedling was 3 or 4 weeks old, you cut all the roots off, and you've obtained such an amazing nabari using that technique. But that is a seedling cutting, therefore, whereas this is simply a cutting from the top of the new extending growth, and that's different. So they're both cuttings taken last year, but one's a seedling cutting, the other is a cutting off the top of the tree.
I've just tried to expose the roots of, just to show the audience that how the nebari is good, very well formed in a cutting compared to a seedling cutting. I'm not discouraging that seedling cutting is bad, but if you want to achieve greater results in short period of time, I think cuttings works much better than the seedling cutting. But nevertheless, both have a very good nebari.
Now, I think at this point we've got these trees that have some sacrificial growth left on them, and then we actually have some of the formative branches when the tree is an actual bonsai. Can you explain the process of deciding which shoots to allow to grow and which shoots you want to keep relatively small and close to the bottom of the trunk? Because it's important to make these decisions very, very early in the process.
Absolutely. So that's a very important point, Harry. Always in pine, these are, first you have to think that how tall or how bigger tree you want. All these trees which I'm training are targeted to be a Shohin size tree. They are not targeted to be a big size
so
tree.
So 8 inch or below.
Yeah,
in
18
height.
inch. Yeah, absolutely. So the most important point after the nebari is the taper. The taper is very important. If you go to any exhibition, you will see the most attractive trees which is having a good root base and a taper. Then your eye goes into the branching. So similarly, we try to make first the root structure, and then we try to thicken up the base, not like randomly. We want to thicken up the base in a tapered form. And the only levers you have with pine is the sacrificial branches, which should be at a different point, different height. And one of the leaders, you let it grow as a sacrificial branch. Now, in this one, we are looking at the example of a real cutting, which is not a seedling cutting. In this real cutting, if you look at the avenues of the number of buds are very limited, because since it is a cutting, it is not a seedling cutting. Only in seedling cutting you get a lot of buds at the base.
Right.
That is the advantage of seedling cutting, that lot of buds are there. But in a cutting you get very limited buds. So obviously my target for this one is not to have a small tree. So as I mentioned, the number of buds in a cutting is very limited avenue. We don't get much buds, and that's the reason we can't really make a small tree. We can make a small tree, but it will not be beautiful. So here my target is bigger than the Shohin size tree. And right now I have created a lovely nebari with a cutting, and I'm going to let this leader grow as far as it can, and I'm going to treat the right side branch as my main trunk. So this is sacrificial branch.
So your final bonsai will actually be, if I can pull this back, up this line, and this side is the sacrificial
side.
Is
the sacrificial. And I'm going to train this in the ground. Because I want to achieve a bigger size tree. Unless you don't put in the ground, you will not going to get a very thick base.
Yes.
And that's the technique which I learned in Taiwan. This is how they do it. They are having relatively, if I give one example, I have been to Taiwan 2 times. Once, then my friend took me to their field where they were growing Japanese black pine, and the amount of sacrificial branches. Here we think of, couple of feet. They talk in couple of meters as a sacrifice branch. The turns and twists they give.
So this side will really elongate and get to 10 foot, but this is still kept very, very short.
And I will keep on shaping this and
so making sure you put some movement into the the trunk line while you can, and ensuring that there's plenty of health, but also potential new branches.
Yes. So I'm going to wire this portion, and I'm going to give exaggerated twists and turns, because the moment it becomes thicker, obviously the turns and it will not going to be that.
You start to lose the
So that's the reason. That's my learning from Taiwan, that how to achieve a great tree within a short span of time. So my target is in 10 years time, this would be almost 70-80% complete, then I will work on the refinement part. So I am hoping in 15 years time I will have a proper bonsai tree in the UK
A
grown from a
high
cutting.
quality. Yes, that's fantastic. So you've now brought in these two amazing black pines that are 3.5 years old.
3.5 to 4 years old.
You know, are they from seedling cuttings or cuttings?
Yes. They are from seedling cuttings because I only explored cuttings avenue only last year. Last 1.5 years I was trying to experiment with cuttings, and I said, okay, wow, cuttings are working now. But before that, obviously, I started with seedling cuttings.
Yeah.
And this one particular is almost 3.5 to
Can we
4
hold
years.
this up, because it's incredible if we can show it
Yeah.
to camera, but also show the bottom of the pot. Incredible amount of rooting, literally through the pots. It actually going gangbusters, this tree. It's quite difficult to see how thick it is at the base.
Because of the number of sacrifice branches.
Yes.
That's where I want to put emphasis on that. What happens, I chose these two trees of almost the same age, but here the difference is I have removed the needles which are shading the bottom ones in this one, because I know that you are coming for shooting, so that's the only tree I left without removing the needles.
I see. I see. Yes.
So, and because of the number of sacrifice branches, the base thickens up exponentially. So, for example, how I remove the shaded so that the shading will not going to happen. Ideally, I can use these cuttings for my next set of pine propagation, and they will be fully pumped up right now to be the next set of my production. But however, I just wanted to show you that I just have to remove the needles so that
in order
nothing-
for the light to get down to those lower
Yes.
branches.
So all these needles you have to remove from the sacrifice branch so that the bottom bits can get a lot of light. So the same thing I'm going to do on all the sacrifice branches. I will remove so that
So the really important thing for people who are just starting field growing or developing pine cuttings is that you can build up a heavy trunk by just throwing the cutting into the grounds.
Yeah.
But the tree will never backbud if you don't start looking after and developing your branches right low down at the base of the tree from the very early years. You're then going to be dictated into having a very tall pine. You can't have something that can be cut right down and used as a show hen, or even slightly larger.
Yes. So this one has got a lot of sacrificial branches. If I can count right now, it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, almost 11 or 12 sacrifice branches are there in this one to thicken up the base to achieve a taper. So now it is looking a bit tidy because I removed all the needles on this sacrifice branch. And if you look at this, is extending the second flush of growth already. Harry, the thing is, this one, this much is like 4 or 5 inches tall, and all this growth is in last 10 days.
In the last 10 days.
In last 10 days. So if you look at this particular sacrifice branch, I am letting it extend, and probably I will let it extend for at least 3 to 4 feet tall. This one.
So we can see the base down here, and then the sacrificial is actually almost as thick as the base. I mean, it's putting incredible thickness on there.
And right now the actual magic will start once this becomes 3 feet tall and full of needles. Then the base will thicken up exponentially. So
wow.
this is probably the second year of extension in this one. I was focusing on this second flush of growth. So from this year, that has started from this point until here, but now the second flush is again growing, and the extension in the candle of second flush you are seeing is probably around 10 to 12 days, because I see this every single day and I take a picture just to see myself that how fast it is growing. So pine, the more water, the more fertilizer you give in the summer season, they thrive. They are like weeds.
We're actually having a relatively cool July. our day temperatures are only 18, 19, 20 degrees centigrade.
That's
You're
really
still really pushing that much growth.
I would say pines are active between 12 degree onwards, and 18 to 20. If you look at summer with wet rainfall and all those things,
With
pine
the
love water.
humidity, yes.
Pine love humidity. Black JBP love humidity and water.
And would you say that the night temperatures, particularly earlier in the season, have any effect on the growth rates and development of your black pines? I've always been under the understanding that 12 degrees is almost, at night, is almost a magic figure.
Yeah.
Where the tree has continual warmth 24/7,
Yeah.
and will really, that's where it really gets strong and grows well.
Yes. So with pine, what I understood was the moment you get a day temperature somewhere between 18 degrees to 25 degrees, they thrive. If you look at closely, this is a beautiful nebari. Probably, I don't know whether you can see. All these are roots, radial roots, and they are getting fused together to create a nice thick base. All these are sacrifice branches, you can see, and which I'm going to produce, let them extend. So this is a sacrifice branch, and some of them one of them I'm going to use as a secondary leader. Once I remove the sacrifice branch, there has to be a leader to create this small size tree, almost like 18 inches tall tree. And throughout the period, I'm thinking of keeping this only in this pond basket. So if you look at this one, this is a 4-year-old and already having a very nice root structure on 360 degree. I mean, I think the back side looks much better than the front. Nevertheless, the point I want to emphasize was I took a cutting on the top of it, and here is the cutting. If you look at
So this is actually a cutting
of the top of this one, and if you look at the height of the cutting of the original tree, it's, I think, taller than the original
I
tree.
think you were right there.
Yeah.
Yes.